Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June 2024 MRRA Update Town Hall. My name is Shannon Lurkey, and I am the Director of Communications for the Department of Corrections. If you're using a computer, you can usually access accessibility settings and shortcuts through audio settings. You can also select the button that has two CCs to turn on closed captioning. To ask questions, you may type into the chat box. Your question may be included in the question and answer session later. If you need assistance with digital accessibility, you may reach out to Rose Waddell via email at rose.widell@state.mn.us. Today, I'm going to provide an overview of MRRA development. After that, Commissioner Schnell will offer remarks, followed by a time for questions with the Commissioner. We are recording the session, and you may submit questions at any time through the chat. Please keep in mind that we cannot address specific cases. Your questions will be presented anonymously. Let's start with an overview of MRRA, the Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act, passed by the legislature in 2023. The goal of MRRA, as stated in the motto, is to encourage incarcerated people to use today to improve tomorrow. Developing the framework for the new law is expected to take 18 to 24 months. The concept of incentivizing people to improve themselves during their time of incarceration is grounded in research and represents a shift in how Minnesota handles incarceration and programming. We will touch on this a few more times this evening, but the Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act changes the focus from how much time a person spends in prison to how that time is spent. There are four components to MRRA. The first is the development of an individualized rehabilitation plan, or IRP. Each incarcerated person will participate in a process to assess their individual strengths and needs, set goals, and identify barriers. Qualifying incarcerated people may get earned incentive early release by demonstrating progress prescribed by their individualized rehabilitation plan, or IRP, and by demonstrating pro-social behaviors. Examples include substance use disorder treatment, cognitive skills programming, mental health counseling, domestic abuse programming, vocational skills training, secondary and post-secondary education, and more. People who earned incentive early release will go directly to supervised release. Early incentive early release means that a qualifying incarcerated person may be able to be released up to 17% earlier. An easier way to think about this is by considering an example where a person is sentenced to 100 months. Under current practice, that person would be eligible for supervised release after 67 months, or 2/3 of their sentence, regardless of that person's participation in rehabilitation programming. Under MRRA, that same person who completes their individualized rehabilitation plan, or IRP, may be eligible after 50 months, or 1/2 of their sentence. What research has shown is that incentives work. 39 other states have implemented earned release policies. Data from Minnesota's own Challenge Incarceration Program, also called CIP, shows that people who complete the program are 32% less likely to reoffend with a new felony conviction, 35% less likely to be reincarcerated for a new crime, and that the state spent about $4,600 less per participant. Upon release, a formerly incarcerated person may earn a shortened period of community supervision or earned supervision abatement by meeting the goals of their release plan. The goals may include maintaining employment, participation in chemical health aftercare programming, ongoing mental health counseling, and positive efforts to reintegrate with family and the community. Cost savings are expected through a reduction in the size of the incarcerated population. The Justice Reinvestment savings will be reinvested to support victims, enhance supervision services, fund crime prevention and intervention efforts, as well as correctional programs. This graph visually demonstrates the example mentioned a moment ago of an incarcerated person sentenced to 100 months. The blue shows the 17% earlier an incarcerated person who successfully completes their individualized rehabilitation plan, or IRP, can move to supervision, as well as a shortened period of earned supervision abatement in green when release plan goals are met. In our current system, people serve 2/3 of their sentence in prison with the remaining 1/3 on supervised release. MRRA incentivizes rehabilitation through participation in programming, allowing an incarcerated person to earn an earlier release from prison and to earn an earlier discharge from supervision, as long as they fully participate in the programs and services in the plans they help to create. The result is a reduced risk of reoffending, which translates to fewer victims, safer prisons, and safer and healthier communities. MRRA is needed because recidivism rates have not shifted significantly in decades. The 5-year rearrest rate is almost 80%. In fact, a 1% reduction in the 3-year re-imprisonment rate would save the Department of Corrections more than $5 million and would save the state more than $57 million. Imprisonment can be criminogenic because imprisonment can cause people to be more likely to commit crime after release. A Minnesota study found that warehousing, which is having incarcerated people sit idle without work or programs, interventions, and services, increased the likelihood of recidivism by 13%. 20% of releases from Minnesota prisons since 2010 were idle for their entire confinement period, and about half of an incarcerated person's time is spent idle on average. We've talked about the why of MRRA. Now let's talk about how MRRA is being developed. MRRA planning and development is being undertaken by 2 project team leaders and a handful of work groups. The work groups will consult with legislatively identified groups to aid in the creation of policy. Public engagement is also a crucial element of the process. Carly Jorgensen is the Director of MRRA Planning and Implementation. She has served the Department of Corrections in a number of areas and has a strong commitment to supporting both staff and justice-involved individuals. Marisa Williams is the Manager for MRRA Planning and Implementation. She too has served the DOC in a variety of roles over nearly a quarter century. In addition to the MRRA project leads, there are 5 work groups, each with a specific focus: defining criteria, programming, individualized rehabilitation plan process and release plan process, discipline and incentives, and communications and engagement. The work groups are comprised of DOC staff and county correctional partners from a variety of disciplines to ensure multiple points of view in the development of MRRA policy. The MRRA law requires consultation with a number of legislatively identified groups to ensure broad perspectives are included in the development of MRRA policy. These are just some of the groups that will be consulted. In terms of public engagement, the DOC will provide multiple ways for people to engage. For example, town halls like this one. You can sign up for email updates, visit the DOC MRRA webpage, take surveys, and email the project leads. If you're visiting the DOC webpage, or if you have visited the DOC webpage recently, you might have noticed the MRRA logo with a photo of construction workers. That's because MRRA is under construction. Click on the construction slide or in the black banner where the red arrow is pointing to get to the MRRA webpage. On the MRRA page, you'll find a spot to sign up for email updates, infographics like the roadmap that outlines the process, and the green button to enter our Engagement HQ site. Clicking on that green button that says Learn More about MRRA and take our introductory survey brings you into our engagement site, where you'll find the most up-to-date information, including a timeline and survey and engagement opportunities. You can meet our project team, read about the timeline, and once again, sign up for email updates. Here, you can also take our introductory survey, with more surveys planned for the future. The first survey asks you to rate your overall understanding of MRRA and let us know why you're interested. You can also tell us your level of support for MRRA and tell us why you answered as you did. And finally, before I hand this off to the Commissioner, here are some answers to some of the most frequently asked questions. First, who is eligible for MRRA? Those with less than 365 days to serve at intake, people serving life or indeterminate sentences, and people subject to good time under Section 244.04. When will MRRA begin? The goal is to have all policies approved and published by January 1st, 2025. Implementation will be rolled out throughout the year 2025. How can an incarcerated person prepare for MRRA? The best way to prepare for the implementation of MRRA is to engage in available programming, demonstrate pro-social behavior, and begin to develop a release plan that includes the necessary supports and changes for a person to have a successful reentry and positive reintegration to the community. Examples include ensuring a strong support network, having a plan to prevent relapse, and more. Another frequently asked question is, why is MRRA taking so long? Well, it's a substantial change in law that requires a robust and thorough process that includes the reviewing of research, consultation with national experts, and gathering of feedback from a number of stakeholders, current and formerly incarcerated people, and others. Another key stakeholder are victims. The Department of Corrections is committed to ensuring that the voices of victims, their families, and victim advocates are heard throughout the process. At this time, I will now turn it over to Commissioner Paul Schnell for his opening remarks. And I'd just like to remind you that you can place your questions in the chat and we will get to as many as we can. Commissioner, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. I want to just say thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. With me here is Marisa Williams, who, as Shannon mentioned, is one of our MRRA managers. I want to just start out by, first of all, I think just acknowledging the fact that there is tremendous interest. Hundreds of people are joining this call tonight, and we have had numerous conversations with both current and formerly incarcerated people about this. I in fact, we had a meeting just this past Monday night with a group of people talking about their perceptions of what will be important for MRRA to be successful. But let me start out by saying that MRRA is like nothing else in the country. As Shannon mentioned, many states have early release programs, but none have incentives to the broad range of offense types that MRRA offers. And this stems from the recognition that the vast majority of people are going to release from our prisons at some point in time. And that it is ultimately in Minnesota's best interest for people to come out with the issues that they have that cause them to become engaged in various types of criminal activity, to have those addressed, to address their needs and reduce their risks. As mentioned, Minnesota uses that determinant sentencing system. And so that today, that 100-month scenario that Shannon talked about, if Marisa and I started that 100-month prison sentence today, and we were going to both go through the exact same thing, have that robust assessment, work our plan. And in today's scenario, we would serve 67 months in prison and 33 months on supervised release, as was mentioned. One of the key distinctions, however, is that today, let's just use that scenario. Marisa comes in and she does everything she needs to do to work her plan, to address the underlying issues, whether that's substance use or mental illness, or she needs vocational skills, whatever that may be. And I, on the other hand, don't. I resist, I struggle, I fight, I push back, whatever it may be. In today's scenario, it doesn't matter that Marisa did well and I did not do so well. We are both going to walk out of prison the same day. And the legislature looked at this and they began to ask the question, does that make sense? Does it make sense that two people who clearly represent very different kind of realities are walking out of prison the same day? Wouldn't it be better if we incented people like Marisa to do the things that she needs to do that ultimately are going to result in fewer victims, less crime, less reoffending, less incarceration, which are all things that serve the best interest of our state. Now, let's be clear, accountability does become an important part of what the correction system is here for. And that is a reality. At the same time, I think it is generally the expectation of people that people who come through the correction system should come out better than when they went in. And so that does become a really important aspect of what MRRA is all about. So tonight, this is our first opportunity really to talk in a much more public forum. There has been some conversations in the past that when we were having other conversations around COVID and so forth, where some people had asked about these types of programs or initiatives. Now that it's here, we are in the midst of this planning. Input does become critical. We are taking back the work of our work groups to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated as well to get their input. And as policy gets developed, we will begin to get specific feedback about what that looks like. One of the things that I think is also important, and one of the things that was clearly legislative intent, was that earned incentive early release is not a given. Earned incentive early release is and must be earned. And that, I think, is something that we want to make sure is emphasized here. That we do not want people to believe that there's a presumption that earned incentive release is going to be the standard or the norm. Now, certainly, the more people that take advantage of the programs that reduce risk and address individual needs, that's in all of our best interest, in their best interest and ours collectively. And so we really want to encourage that. But it does become essential that people are aware that earned incentive early release must be earned. And with that, I'm going to just go back and turn this back over to Shannon to open it up for questions. I would add one other thing. Shannon mentioned the fact that victims play a key role in this, and that is not just, it's certainly a value for the agency. It's something that from a restorative justice standpoint, we believe becomes critical, and it is also a statutorily required component of this program. The Department of Corrections will be obligated to reach out to and make good faith efforts to connect with crime victims and to get their feedback and input. And part of that is we simply want to make sure that there's opportunities for people who've been harmed by crime to also have the opportunity to heal. And so opportunities around working with our victim services and restorative justice unit, we hope can be a much broader part of the discussion, as well as much stronger partnerships with victim coalitions that exist across our state, which really provide and are absolutely critical to the public safety network across our state. So that does become a key and important provision of MRRA. And so with that, Shannon, I'll turn it back to you to begin bringing questions to us.
So I'll just let you know that there is a flurry of questions coming in through the chat. So thank you all very much for submitting those questions, and we are going to get to as many as we can this evening. The first one that I have is, how do staffing shortages affect the implementation of MRRA?
It's a great question. Even during the legislative process, when I testified about MRRA, we talked with legislators about the fact that stabilizing the DOC's workforce had to be a top priority in order for MRRA to realize success. The good news on that front is that we engaged in, the state regularly engages in every 2 years in contract negotiations, and the DOC did ultimately get and settle contracts with our various different bargaining units. And there was substantial increases, in particular on the security or the safety side of our business. And because of that, we are seeing our hiring and some of our retention really starting to show progress, significant progress, with all of our facilities, with the exception of one right now being over 90%. And we have a number of people in the academy or slated to start in the academy at that facility that will bring us up over that 90% mark. Now, let me be clear, we still face challenges. Despite the fact that our hiring is much, much better than it was, we also have issues around people retirements. And so we have to really actively engage in keeping up our efforts to recruit and retain staff. And we're doing that in a number of ways. Now, as we look at programs like MRRA for the sake and the good of our incarcerated population, we're also doing things at this time to make it a better and easier place to work. Things like employee wellness and support, our initiatives that were funded in the legislative session, because we wanted a comprehensive approach to not just making it a better environment for people who are incarcerated, whose mission we are here to serve, whose needs we're here to serve. We wanted to make sure that the staff who are critical to us delivering on these services had the kind of support and services that were beneficial to them, to make it a better place to work. And we believe that MRRA really is, in many cases, one of the ways that can make this a better place for the people who are incarcerated and, frankly, for our staff, because it provides an empowering voice.
So here's who decides who meets the requirements?
So one of the things that happens is that as part of the robust assessment process, we lay out an individualized rehabilitation plan, as was mentioned. That may include a whole variety of different programs and services that a person with their own voice included in this process helps to identify. And so let's just say that Paul Schnell has to complete substance use disorder treatment. I would need to go through that. If that's one of the key elements or programs that I need to complete, then obviously successful completion of that in accordance with standards that are established for treatment programs across the nation, SAMHSA guidelines, really set in place what determines that completion of that program. Now, there are going to be other things. There will be a scheme, and we want to make sure that it's well understood. What's included in that? What are the core rehabilitative programs that have been primarily identified for someone to participate in? How does risk weigh into this? And when I talk about risk, I'm talking about the fact that the risk principle says that we should be providing higher levels of services and supports to those people who have higher levels of risk. And at the same time, how do things like discipline and stuff weigh into these decisions? So the goals of the group who are doing all of this planning will be to put together a framework that ultimately will guide how that happens. In the end, it's not going to be a single person that decides whether or not somebody has met the levels of requirements to earn individualized early release. That will be determined by a broad variety of people who are involved in and leading the various different programs that I, as a person, may have to complete in order to earn that incentivized early release. Because I'll just be honest, nobody wants to be in the position of, no staff person wants to be in the position of making that individual decision for somebody. And similarly, we want to make sure that that there's a level of fairness to that decision, and that we're really determining how it is that we apply things like behavioral standards or discipline to these decisions. And so we want that stuff to be very clear and specified up front.
So just a clarification on the timeline, because it was always anticipated that it would take 18 to 24 months to get MRRA policies up and going. So that someone asked, is it from the law? Is it 18 to 24 months from when the law was passed in 2023, or is it from now? So just elaborate on the timeline as you see it.
Yeah, so what it really was 18 to 24 months from the time of passage, which would really go into the spring of 2025. Now, our goal here is certainly to have as much of this put together as possible. I can tell you that Marisa and Carly and all of the work group leads are the number of meetings and the amount of time that is being spent on this by DOC staff and our partners across the system, and conversations that are being had with currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated is consuming a considerable amount of time. I will tell you that I am directly involved in MRA planning and working very closely with Carly and Marisa and the entire team, because it is a massive priority. It's a shift in how the Department of Corrections operates and does business. And we think we believe it's a smart move in the long haul, but it has to be done in a way that is transparent and clear. And that's what the legislature expected. So we anticipate that these policies will be published in January, and we expect that they will be published and out there. Then implementation will begin. There may be the ability of us to begin to start to issue guidance to people who are currently incarcerated, that ultimately will have them complete certain tasks or packets that starts to put together information that speaks to those people who've been in for some period of time and want to be assessed for whether or not, or what they need to do in order to earn incentivized early release. The other thing that I will say is that the legislature also required us to look at things like absence of programming or challenges where there was not enough programming to meet the individual needs of people. And also we have to be in a place where we're reporting on disparities. That was a priority up front, and something that we wanted to make sure that we weren't creating further disparities with this. And so it's something that the teams have been absolutely focused on up front, and something that we will have to report on and look to address as we get into this further. But really right now, we can expect that we would start to take a look at the implementation or applying this to people in early 2025.
Why is treatment not on a first come, first served basis? If they complete the program, it will drop points off and help them get on work release into minimum custody sooner. They make people wait until they are 1 year away from release before they can go to treatment. So sort of a treatment timeline question.
Yeah. So this is one of the shifts that we talked about during the legislative session. Historically, the Department of Corrections has back-end loaded programs, as you pointed out. So if I'm getting close to the end of my release, my confinement release, that's when we're going to put you into treatment, because the treatment is really fresh then for you as you're about to release. The goal with MRA really has been to try and, to the fullest extent possible, to front end load programming. Now there's challenges, because we do have capacity challenges today. We're going to have to address some of that, and we have people coming in. But remember that when we talk about the number of people who are MRA eligible, those people that are under that 1 year, that takes a sizable chunk of people out of the mix in this. Now, we still have planning that we need to do for them. That's required in the law. release planning and trying to figure out what things that they may need and ensuring that we try to develop a plan to get them there. But really, in terms of earned incentive release, supervision abatement, those things are really applied most extensively to people over that year. So we are looking to make that shift. We have made some changes in our treatment programming to create more capacity, looking at the levels of treatment to make sure that we're right sizing the treatment to the individual needs of the person. And we're looking at that in all of the treatment spaces across the DOC. So we can expect that to continue. We also will envision, and we know because of Pell funding, that we're going to see, we intend to see exponential growth in the offering of post-secondary educational opportunities, whether that's more traditional liberal arts stuff like AA and BA degree level stuff, but also the addition of a host of different vocational career tech opportunities that will exist offered by Minnesota State colleges and universities at prisons across the system. And that we really hope that will become, as an evidence-based program, will become part of our strategy and something that we can scale up in a big way using the federal Pell resources.
So there's a handful of questions that have to do with the impact of discipline while incarcerated, or if someone gets new charges while in prison, how do those factors impact MRRA?
We are working on finalizing exactly what that, what the model, the logic model looks like for how that happens. I can tell you that the groups are looking at things like, how long after imposition of discipline does something become stale, and therefore not have the same level of weight. But I can't understate that when we look at this from what the public expects, that programs are one thing, and programs we believe are critical, and all of the evidence tells us that it makes a huge difference. But the way in which somebody behaves and lives pro-socially, and even in the prison environment, does become one of those determining factors. And we're not seeing today that because somebody had discipline that they will not be eligible. But we want to be clear that as was mentioned in the slide, what's the best thing that people can do today? Do whatever they can to engage pro-socially and positively in any type of programming that is available to them. And that includes things like even work opportunities, work assignments, and so forth. Those are all things that will matter and be a part of the determination of earned incentive early release.
Family and advocates who will be facilitating reintegration are critical. Will there be opportunities for families and advocates to provide input?
Yes, I mean, we will, as we develop these things, we will provide forums for this. And I get that people are critical. I get that I've certainly gotten many emails from people saying that, you should be releasing people now. And yet I just want to be really honest about that. This MRRA is I think, a unique opportunity for our state and beginning to get some attention nationally around what's possible here. But I think we all know that while human beings are going to be human beings, and human beings are going to have challenges and may fail. But I also think if we don't have a good sense of rationale behind what this is all about, I worry that the right case or the wrong situation will blow this up, and this opportunity will not exist. And so I think it is wise that we are deliberate, that we are thoughtful about this. And I get criticism. I get a lot of it, and I understand the frustrations that people have. At the same time, we're trying to walk a balance here of making sure that that there's clarity about what it takes to earn incentivized early release, and go from there, because that's going to be important in order for there to be public trust and in this, and really, I think that's an important piece that doesn't diminish the voice and the experience of people who are in the system, or their family members or advocates in the system. But there has to be a level of public trust in order for this to prevail over the long haul.
Are there any restorative justice organizations engaged in the working groups?
I will say that we have our restorative justice folks within the DOC. We also have a really active inside RJ council groups, as many of you will know, who have been and will continue to be very involved in a whole variety of these discussions. We continue to provide opportunities for RJ involvement with people, and I would say that we would welcome the involvement of other outside our RJ groups as we continue to go forward. And in terms of helping us with this, I would also indicate that as we think about what's possible, we're not going to answer every single question that possibly could come up between now and January 1st. I think we will have a really good framework for what MRRA looks like operationally, which is what the legislature expected us to do. But there's going to be certainly areas where we're going to continue to develop and grow, whether that's specific programs like this, and even partnerships in the community that are going to be really key and critical as we go forward.
Are there reentry programs considered as part of this so that those released can be successful? For example, having a place to live, or a landlord willing to allow felons, and having employers who will hire felons?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the places where I think when we talk about advocacy, these are places where advocacy can really make a difference. So, certainly challenging the system, challenging the Department of Corrections is one of the strategies that advocates should and do play a role in. But advocates should also be actively engaged in trying to develop the resources to help people be successful. And when that happens, I think we will all be better off. And there is a tremendous amount of work and investment going into things like housing, reentry program expansion around trying to develop workforce, and making sure that we get folks properly placed as they leave prison, working with DEED and some large grants that DEED offered to community-based organizations to help with job placement services for people leaving, and to really develop and grow the number of second chance employers across the state. So there's a lot of things happening in a lot of spaces, but anything that can happen across the board would just be really, really beneficial for all of us.
This person's asking to confirm whether this impacts people who are already incarcerated, or if it's only people incarcerated moving forward.
It does impact and will apply to people who are currently incarcerated, as long as they meet the statutory eligibility. That we will take a look at what they have done and come up with a framework for what that looks like exactly, and evaluate them for earned incentive early release.
So there's going to be this transition time, and there's a handful of questions also for incarcerated people who perhaps are going to reach their 2/3 sometime in 2025. So does that mean that potentially their supervision time might be shorter? How might that timeline impact those folks?
Yeah, so if just because somebody may not have been around to earn that earned incentive early release, there's nothing to say that they can't reduce their active supervision term through supervision abatement. And just one of the things that's key about supervision abatement is that the entire term of supervision remains there. It's just that that there is a portion of that, about a third of that, can go into abatement status, unsupervised status, which still is incredibly beneficial to people, and especially those people who are really doing well. So I think that is going to be available to people who are also out or who come out after these policies are established.
Does a victim of ongoing domestic abuse have any say?
Yes, 100%. I mean, look, the first and prevailing underlying critical requirement for the Department of Corrections has to be public safety, period. And so if we have if that kind of information, things that we can work with, issues or concerns related to victim safety, that is absolutely, I just want to be explicitly and plainly clear, that will affect somebody's ability to be released. It just is the reality. And so we have to be in a place where we can address and must address the safety needs of people in the community, period.
How will the DOC deal with those who are homeless and those who don't have any money?
So I think one of the things that the DOC has been doing is we've grown our housing program services. We've been doing a tremendous amount of work with the state housing folks. Have really doubled down. We invested, I think, $5 million in new money into housing specifically in this space. So I think, does it meet all the needs? No, we're not going to be in that place. But I would just say that we're going to have to really push and collectively think about how it is that we grow these resources, and it is a priority for the housing folks and the housing people within the DOC. And we know that housing is a critical factor in terms of a person's success. So, we want to be able to create strong partnerships to be able to develop, as folks start to develop their release plans with the hope of earning incentivized early release, especially those people who may have housing challenges. Those things we want to start talking, we want those folks to start thinking about that and talking about this early, connecting with community-based resources to really develop their plan for success as it relates to housing and beyond. So that's the goal. But while we have made progress and we are making new investments in this area, the need is great, we know.
Are people who've committed sex offenses eligible for MRRA?
Yes, sex offense specific cases are eligible for MRRA, assuming that they are not serving a life or an indeterminate sentence. And we do have a number of people who are serving indeterminate sentences or life sentences based on sexual offenses only. And, when I say only, I mean not that it wasn't part of a commission of a homicide as well. Which is where most life sentences come from. But they are eligible. Sex offender treatment will become a really critical component of the opportunity for earned incentive release. We are working with internally and looking at treatment capacity for people and talking with the Department of Human Services, who some of you may know has historically operated a treatment program within the Department of Corrections at Moose Lake that was closed a number of years ago. And we're looking to see if we can expand some capacity to help address some of these treatment needs on that front.
How will facility disparities be addressed? The differences in programming and staffing levels at different facilities. How does that impact people?
Well, I think first and foremost, our objective is to grow programming possibilities across the DOC. And I would say that in particular, one of the areas that we want to give more attention to is the establishment and the development of programs in our higher custody facilities. And again, this speaks to the risk principle, and that risk principle says that what we should be doing is applying the highest amount of services, programming, and supports to those people who represent the highest risk. By doing that, we have the potential to reduce risk from a community safety standpoint most. So one of the things that we know that historically we've had higher levels of programming and lower custody levels. And now we really are looking to develop programming really across the system. That, again, is going to take time. We have a lot going on. Things like the establishment and the development of peer support programs in prison that IPs are doing that. We believe that people within the system can be resources to help support those others, their fellow incarcerated folks, to do well, and other systems have used incarcerated people to help with co-delivery of cognitive skills program training, and we're doing some training of people in that right now. We think all of these things are creative strategies to grow the amount of programming across the system to allow people to access it and in the end be successful.
Will there be mentoring from case managers and other DOC staff to help?
Yeah, mentoring, and we want that mentoring, and I think that's a great addition. I mean, we want that mentoring to happen at the case management level. Even one of the things we're seeing is that, corrections officers, and we know, we just meeting with a group of formerly incarcerated people just a week ago tonight. I heard from them just the importance of the way that individual staff really made a difference for them throughout the term of their incarceration. And so we really want to lift that up, and we think that that's an important piece for staff. And oftentimes, the staff who know people in the living in the housing units the most, and have the most day-to-day experience with them, and see, the way they live their lives from a pro-social standpoint. They oftentimes are the people who have the least amount of voice in terms of calling out or specifying those incarcerated people who are doing really well. And then, with our RJ folks and units, that we're really looking to develop that peer mentorship, peer supports, obviously on the CD side, which is something that we've seen. We've also seen, a number of people graduate from different types of pastoral studies or pastoral support programs, almost like peer chaplaincy kinds of programs that we want to lift up as well. These are all ways that we believe that there can be really strong and robust peer support.
Does this apply to human trafficking sentences?
It would apply. It could apply to human trafficking sentences. It could. And again, we have to look at, the ability, our ability to have we addressed some of the underlying issues, our ability to manage and supervise people. But I think the key thing to remember is that absent the life sentence, everyone in our system is going to get out. And the question really then becomes, how do we want them to get out? And I think the legislature's decision was, we want to make sure that we're doing all we can to provide levels of incentive to participate and engage in programming and demonstrate behaviors that show change and a reduced risk of reoffense, which is then, as we mentioned earlier, serves the public safety interests of the state.
Will the focus be on higher risk or lower risk people first? What's the prioritization?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you that there's lots of conversation about this. I think the key thing is not so much the priority, but depending upon your risk, higher risk people may need more intervention, more programming. That's just the bottom. That's just the way it is, and that's really what I think becomes key and critical, is that we make sure that we're providing the level of programming based upon that individual's need. And so, but the challenge then really becomes how do we prioritize? Who do we prioritize first? In the end, the risk principle says that we should be really focusing heavily on that higher risk people, but lower risk people may be able to will likely be able to earn incentivized early release doing less because their risk level is lower, which simply makes sense. So all of that is still being worked out. And again, as I mentioned, where we have programming capacity challenges, we're going to have to track that and report that back to the legislature going forward.
Several people have asked if all of Minnesota's prisons will be forced to participate in MRRA.
Well, I think here's the answer to that question. It's not about the prison, it's about the people. It is an opportunity that is provided to people who are eligible. And it's not about the prison. This is the Department of our state policymakers have enacted a policy, and that's what MRRA is. It's a legislative policy that has been put in place with the expectation that the Department of Corrections operationalize that through policies. And so this will be available across the system.
How does MRRA impact CIP, the Challenge Incarceration Program, work release? And we'll stop there because it fell off.
So CRP is another one of the early release programs. CIP and CRP are the two early release programs that Minnesota has today. Some of this will be looked at in terms of what works best for them. MRRA as a CIP as a program, the way CIP operates, that could be looked at as a one program intervention that a person could participate in for MRRA eligibility. Again, these are all things that are being explored. Work release could be, we're looking at how work release gets used and how work release applies to MRRA. But one of the things that, as we're looking at things like we talked earlier about substance use disorder treatment capacity. And let's just say that we have somebody who maybe it's that person under a year who has deemed to have high need for inpatient treatment. That person, we might be able to work release them directly into inpatient treatment for the last month or whatever the length of that treatment program is, or 6 weeks. And they would actually do work release as inpatient treatment. So these are things that we want to explore and really try to maximize to make sure that the more we can have people who are in the system complete before they get out into community supervision, it helps them to be successful when it comes to things like their job searches and those sorts of things, reintegration with family, all of those really important things. And so the more we can try and have that person complete during their custody status time, the better off it can be for them.
Is everyone who is eligible for MRRA, is everyone who is eligible for MRRA considered for it, or does an incarcerated person have to apply?
There won't be it's not going to be an application like you might find with CIP. But I think you can anticipate that people in the system will be required to. It's not going to be something where the system is going to do the work for people. There will be expectations that what that exactly looks like, we don't know yet. There's been some conversations about it, but like the completion of packets that talk about their release plan and who are their pro-social supports, and if substance use recovery is a part of their ongoing success plan, how are they going to, what are they going to do to address those needs? Are there victim issues? So all of these things will be something that people will have to do and submit as part of this and part of the release planning and the MRRA review process, because we think it's really important that that this is not, MRA again is something that's earned. It's not passive. It's not presumed. It's something that people have to actively participate in, demonstrate, and show that they're committed to this. And so, what that exactly looks like in terms of that mechanism to have undergo review and those sorts of things, have your plan looked at, is still under development, but that's certainly something that has been talked about and will continue to be talked about, and hopefully put together sometime in this fall.
If the DOC peer support specialists start meeting with IPs up to 3 months before reentry and follow them into the community for up to 3 years, what outcomes and statistics would you like to see and keep track of?
Well, I think these are the things that we wanted to, that you asked the question that provided the answer. If we could do those types of things and provide that kind of tracking, the 90 days before and the follow-up afterward, all of those things would be really, really helpful. But we're gonna, we have to, this is a big task, and to really build this entire system. And one of the things I've said to people that oftentimes people don't even think about is that the fact that this got passed, and we have to be able to track how this all is going to happen, in what official records formats that we're going to be able to track the system to say that Paul Schnell earned incentive release, or Marisa earned incentive early release. We have to be able to track that, report that in official government systems. And all of these procedures have to be developed and in place before we just start applying willy-nilly what it is that we have going and letting people out. We have to be able to account for what it is we're doing. That's the public trust component of this.
I think there's a fair amount of confusion about the point that people with less than 365 days at intake not being eligible. I think some people are taking that to mean that they have less than a year left on their sentence. Can you clarify that what exactly that? So if you're sentenced to 90 days in prison, then you are not eligible at all. But it doesn't. If your sentence is more than a year, regardless of where you are in it, you are eligible with except for the other exceptions. Is that right?
That's correct. This does become a bit of a challenge. We oftentimes we see an incredible high number of people who come into prison and are going to be with us for well less than a year. We see people coming in for weeks, or days, months. Certainly creates a massive churn, not what is optimal. But because of things like how when sentencing occurs, credit for time served, all of these types of things really can impact that on the back end. And so if that's what happens, if you have that less than that year remaining, that when you come in, the ability of us to be able to program for you is really challenged. And that was a recognition that we had to face up front. And again, remember, most of these people are coming in with 6 months or less. And in fact, we see many people at 6 months or less. And so just to put somebody through the assessment process and get somebody through MDT, multidisciplinary team review, where that incarcerated person sits with other people at education, treatment, medical people, and as part of developing that individualized rehabilitation plan. If you have to apply that to a high number of people that are, before they're not going to have the plan developed by the time they release, it really becomes a lot of resources being applied when we can't do much about it. Now, what the legislation does require is that we help people who got committed to us and have less than that year, to still develop a robust release plan with them that is targeted at trying to address to the fullest extent possible their needs while they're in, and certainly when they hit a reentry. But if let's just say you have a person who's been in and they have less than a year remaining, and we get the policy framework for MRRA, we make determinations, and Marisa has 7 months and we determined that she's earned incentive early release, she could realize that earned incentive early release because her sentence was considerably longer than that year. So so it still applies. That's really more focused on the new cases coming into the system.
This person says that some prisons won't let incarcerated people get the tools and programs that they need to be a part of MRRA. And how will that be handled in the future?
So, I know that, there's things like when you say won't let, it may be the timing, it may be capacity, it may be those decisions really are not at the end of the day an individual facility decision. They are agency policy decision, and then done in concert with somebody is not receptive to participating in treatment. Obviously, treatment's not going to be offered, and so these are going to be things that are going to affect people who are in the system, and so we need to be able to address it. But the policy decisions around availability or access to programs will be centrally made in terms of prioritization, and then on an individual level, they're somebody's willingness to participate in treatment, or somebody who engaged in conduct that may make it difficult for us to be able to get them into treatment for a period of time. Those things are going to be challenges to address, and certainly would slow somebody's access to that. But really, it's a central decision.
How would someone participate if they have no mandated treatment or programs?
So the issue is not so much mandated. We're moving away from the use of mandated programs and talking about what we refer to more as primary rehabilitative programs. In the past, the people were disciplined for not doing certain programs. Today, really, as we move to an incentive-based system, the lack of incentive is the consequence of not doing programming. And so, but the fact that somebody does not have what has historically been referred to as mandated programming does not mean they don't have criminogenic needs or childhood traumas, or a whole variety of other things that they could benefit from. And so those are going to be the things that are going to get focused on, whether that's vocational training, whether that's perhaps some type of cognitive skills training, which we know probably a significant portion of our population could benefit from. And so, those are going to be the programs that people will have to participate in, or would be encouraged to participate in, assuming that they want to participate and have access to the incentives.
So I think we have time for about 2 more, and then we'll go with closing remarks. Just for people listening, I want you to know that we will post this recording, so you will be able to watch it again later. But before we go to that, if someone reoffends after early release, is there a harsher punishment? Can they become eligible again?
So they could, but remember that reoffense will affect somebody's risk levels, and that's going to be the issue. And so, when that kind of stuff happens, there is a self-imposed consequence, so to speak, in the sense that it could become very much more difficult for people to earn that, and it's going to have to be something that has to get addressed. Should a person be reconsidered for early release again, what happened last time and what's going to be done differently this time. So there's a lot of facts that have to be, I think, looked at and addressed as we get into this more deeply.
I think this is a good wrap-up question. You mentioned it earlier, but it's worth noting. This person asks if the MRRA is modeled after another state's program. And I think it's not. I think it's fairly unique, but I'll let you take it from there, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think, probably the closest kind of example of it, similar to it, would be the First Step Act, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, signed into law by then President Trump. administration, where it was a certain focus on and largely low risk, low level incarcerees that could be considered for early release by participation in programming. They don't have some of the components built into it that we have. That certainly there is case planning and so forth, but I think our goal around this multidisciplinary focus and robust assessment, and then the opportunity for supervision abatement, and then finally the justice reinvestment component is really unique to Minnesota. So these are things that are quite unique, and we want this to be successful. We need this to be successful for the people we serve and for the people of our state, and to try and reduce people returning into the system. These are the things that today are most frustrating to people, and understandably. And so we want this to be successful. We want this to deliver the opportunities for change that we know are possible and that can help people be successful.
So, Commissioner, do you have, that was kind of a good wrap up, but did you want to make any other final remarks before?
No, I just want to say thank you. I know that I can read the questions, but I know that there's many questions coming in that we did not get to. And I appreciate that. We're going to continue to work on this and try and address frequently asked questions in that web page. Try and provide as much clarity as we can. Use that email address that's on that web page that Carly and Marisa and the team can get back to people. We will do our best to provide unique responses to your unique question. Oftentimes we see that the questions are very similar among people who submit stuff, and so we will try to summarize that in a way that addresses that most broadly. But if you have suggestions, we want to hear from you as well. But more than anything, I can't say anything but more than thank you for participating tonight. Marisa, you want to just say anything as we close up?
Yes, I just want to piggyback off what you just said. Thank you, and you are valuable with your inputs. We do encourage you to reach out to the MRRA email address if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Also visit the website for feedback. There's also, as Shannon indicated earlier, that there is a survey there that you are able to participate in. And again, we just appreciate your time and your thoughts for even wanting to be a part of the town hall tonight. It does mean a lot. And again, your point of view, your perspective, and your input is important to us. So please feel free to reach out.
Commissioner Marisa, I want to thank you so much for your presentation tonight. And I am going to put up here for all of you to see where you can go. Just a reminder to go to our DOC MRR page. There's the address there. You can visit our engagement page for the latest information. You can send emails to mrra.doc@state.mn.us. And this video of tonight's town hall will be posted on our MRRA webpage. And our next one is slated for, I believe, November 14th. Don't quote me on that, but if you go to the MRRA page, it will tell you when our next public town hall is. And there will be other engagement opportunities, hopefully throughout the development process as we move forward. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us, and please have a very nice evening.